And I think we are live. Welcome, welcome, welcome back to another really special episode of the Unlocked Jam Room. Um, I'm so privileged. First of all, before I begin anything, I would really like to thank all of you for supporting me and supporting my guests and all the wonderful, amazing people that I've been interviewing and having discussions with. But today is a really special episode. It's a really special episode because I have with me as my guest today one of the greatest minds of audio, not only in India but in my opinion in the entire world, because this man has recorded and mixed and designed things that are my favorite pieces of music, pieces of sound design that I have ever heard. And I have heard a lot of music. I put him at par with any of the greatest audio engineers in the world. He has countless national awards, countless film fairs, countless. So without much further ado, I'm going to welcome one of the masters of the audio world, Maestro BISHWADEEP Chatterjee, and he's right here with us. I'm going to invite him into the session. We are just waiting for him to join in, and the connection is ready. Gurudev.
Hi. Thanks for all the kind words. You put a huge responsibility on me already.
No. First of all, my Shashtang Pranam to you, because I am such a huge fan of your work, and I have been following your work for so long. Vishwadipda,
Thank you.
Is such an honor. It is such a privilege. It is such a pleasure that I'm getting to have this conversation with you. I'm in no way deserving to be having this conversation or educated enough for that, but this generation we are a little ahead of our game. So
Yes.
I am really honored. And one thing I want to mention before everything is that I have worked and been part of sessions with some amazing engineers in the world. Like I've been recorded by Ben Arundel. I've worked with Tony Maserati and all these people. And so after that, when I hear your music, you are one of the greats in the world, not in India, not in Bollywood. You're one of the greatest in the world. And at least in my experience, in my few years that I've been doing music, what my
Thank
ears
you.
tell.
Even I'd like to believe that.
You really are, and it is such an honor. Welcome to the show, and I am sure there is a lot of excitement going on. People will be joining in, trickling in. So the first thing that I wanted to ask you is that you studied at FTII and you went to school there, and then you came to Mumbai in 1987, I believe.
Yes.
1987, straight into the sets of Parinda. I was listening to one of your interviews. And so tell me something, when you go to a film institute or an institute where you study sound or film, and then there is a certain way that your life and your perception of what the film world will be or what your career path will be, all of that is there while you're still a student, but you are kind of guarded by the faculty and the fact that you're still a student and you have teachers guiding you. But once you're out of school and you go into the industry, there must be a different set of realities that come into play as far as building a career and realizing that this is a business and all of that. So can you please tell us a little bit about that journey, how you transitioned from a student to a professional?
Oh, yes. That's a huge thing actually, because what happens is when you go to a school for training, whether you go to the film institute or you go to any medical school or you go to any
Yes.
engineering school, whatever, what happens is like you learn you learn the craft, you learn the trade, you learn the craft, you learn the theory, and you're introduced to a whole new world. Well, that itself is a different level of excitement, because you get to work with certain kind of equipment and certain kind of this thing. At the same time, in the film institute, what happens is that you learn pretty much everything. Apart from sound, you're learning editing, you're learning direction, you're learning screenplay writing, you're made aware of all these things. We used to have inputs in music, we had classes in music. So it was a wholesome kind of a thing that was given to you. But what happens is, when you take all that and you come to a place like Bombay, what you don't bring with you and what you don't have and you cannot have over there is professionalism. So you see, what happens is, it's not that the way they treat, the way they teach you, the way they sing, it's all there. But what happens is, like, you're taking your time to adjust your mics, you're taking your time to adjust a setting, a reverb setting, or you're taking like endless hours of this thing, indulgence. There's a lot of indulgence. So yes, and that costs money. So if you're taking that much of time in a place like Bombay, then somebody's paying for it. So you're either wasting the studio's time, or the client's time, or the musician's time, or the actor's time, whatever. So you need to almost pretty much, your hands should start moving before your mind starts moving. You need to be like absolutely a professional. So we say that you start unlearning in the industry. So yeah. So what happens is, like, whatever data you have collected, whatever this thing. Now what happens is, the 3 years that you have spent over there, you have collected a lot of theory. You've collected. Now it's not that in the beauty of our industry is, like, even if you don't go to a film school or a training school, you can still learn on the job. But what happens is, it takes you that much longer. And very often you don't know why you're doing what you're doing. So this theory provides you that the reason for you to understand, why you're doing this. Absolutely. And there are a lot of these things that you face. So that transition is very important, and that transition is something that a lot of people take a lot of time, or they cannot even. That is this thing to the industry. That is the barrier, the first barrier that you face as you enter the industry. So, sure. But the industry is not all that bad. It gives you a chance, and it gives you several chances. And the other thing is your mindset. You need to work, you need to function, you need to work as a team. So you have to understand all this. So when you're coming, you have to understand what exactly are you there for. Right. So yes, training in any particular institute is a very great thing, but don't lose touch with reality. Back in the day, we did not have social media, we did not have YouTube, we did not have all that. So our window was the library in the institute. When we were 87, when we were coming into Bombay, it was Bombay then, MIDI was still a theory. So MIDI. Yeah. So MIDI was something that we came across, okay, what is this MIDI thing? This is what it's supposed to do. So it was a very exciting time, because there was a lot of things happening in the R&D in the digital front, which later, once we came into Bombay, then we realized that, people already had started working with MIDI. They used to lock the instruments, and this is how MIDI functioned. So there were a lot of things that you picked up, and you are still picking up while you're working. So that was our generation, that was our time. And a few things that never change is, like, okay, today many people are taking this up as a profession, which is a very good thing. The more the merrier. But what also is happening is they are educating themselves in various schools and various institutes. We had just the Film Institute, which provided us that particular training, and private schools were not there, because part of the reason was because the equipment was so elaborate and so cumbersome that it was not possible for a private school to function with that huge an investment. All this changed when computers started coming up. In fact, I have my own studios. I can afford my own studios today because of the digital technology, because of most of the work that we're doing on computers.
I mean, it's possible to do at home and all, people like us have become producers because we didn't have to go into a studio to be able to record something or
Absolutely.
program something. A lot of young people have joined in. Vishwadeep, Anindit is with us. Anindit Roy, you know
Hey,
him.
Arundit.
And Tejinder's son Indrayud, who's a fantastic
Yes,
sarod player.
I've met him also, I think.
He's
I met
there.
his dad, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sanjay Kumar says, Bishu, love you, man. So, there's a lot of excitement in the air today. So this is taking, I mean, if you have to get to a point where your hands act faster than your mind, that takes years of practice, isn't it? I mean, that's just something that your hands know where to go on the console,
Yes.
or which exactly. Like I know, for example, like the great engineers that I've worked with, they type and click on the keyboard like I play tabla.
Right.
Like it's at speed. They're like, and it always mesmerizes me. Like when they open a plugin, they'll go into the audio suite and they know exactly how much to move their mouse to get exactly to the EQ that they're looking for.
Correct.
So I think those guys have like practiced, and you people have like, but at the same time, hi Anindiri saying hi, Mohit, that me also. So that takes years of practice. But I'm wondering, another really interesting thing to me is that you started your background and the way you've started your career was majorly music mixing, right?
Yeah.
Music albums, and then from there you went into films. Then you went into sound design separately.
Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about that journey, and how important is it as a film mixer or a sound designer to have a background of mixing music and have a background of music by itself? How much does that play a role when you actually get into mixing entire films?
Right. See, the reason why I first of all got into this probably had to do with my flirting with the guitar and picking up the guitar and trying to flirt with girls or whatever, trying to impress them and stuff like that. So we used to have all these, we used to have a tabloid called the Sun magazine in those days because we didn't have the internet and stuff like that. So they would come out with lyrics. Yeah, they would come out with lyrics, and they would print lyrics, and they would, a lot of them had, chords written under those lyrics. So you tried to pick up the, you learned, self-taught yourself, how to play chords and what this thing was. So all this is because I realized that I had an ear for music, and probably in the school also they kind of understood this, so they made me in charge of the music department. We were in boarding school in Ooty. So in the Nilgiris. So so it was a very exciting time, and I kind of from there, I suppose that whole thing started that I did not want to do any of these conventional kind of jobs, partly because I was not too good at it, and I was never interested. So, but when the Film Institute happened, and the networking in those days happened, and when I kind of did a bit of whatever research I could out of the place, then I realized this is the place, and these are the courses that this place offered, and you applied for it, and eventually when the prospectus came and you kind of got, you understood what the whole process was, you were beginning to, it started unfolding, and you started realizing, yeah, this is what I would want to do. And fortunately, I did well in the entrance exams, and I got selected, and I surprised myself. And so I landed up over there, and I said, man, this is the place I wanted to be in. And then slowly, as our course progressed, and my this thing was beginning to narrow down to more association with music in whatever way in films. So even today, what happens is our biggest platform is film. There's no independent music industry as such. There's no television has just begun to be an independent industry. But film industry had always been there, and now that has been our biggest showcase. Mayookhb, I mean, if you're a fantastic musician, you're a brilliant musician, and I like, we love what you do. But unfortunately, there is no independent platform to showcase yourself. But tomorrow, if you're working on a mega Bollywood project, suddenly the day after, everybody will know who Mayookh is. That's unfortunately the reality.
I mean,
But
fortunately or unfortunately, the music industry that exists in India is primarily the Bollywood film music industry. That is
correct.
the only industry.
Yes,
And
because in our
rest,
time,
yeah,
when there was a Hindi song, they could not think that, there was a song that could happen, could be independent, and there's no film involved around it. So if somebody,
right.
if there was a song and somebody would ask, "अच्छा ये कौन सा film का है?" So you'd
Ah,
try and tell him, "boss, ये film का नहीं है, किसी का गाना है." So that was something which, apart from Bengal, where
yeah, Bengal
independent
had
music industry always was there. They never
sure.
really cared about Bollywood and this thing because, like Manada used to say that, uh, Bengal is the only place where a singer can buy body gadi shop kinte pare because he can sustain with his own music. He did not need film. So that
Absolutely.
was the beauty of Bengal. But unfortunately, even though there are some rich music bases in places like Rajasthan, Punjab, and Gujarat and the South, an independent music industry never really happened. It was always associated with either film or theater or Nautanki or Jatra, whatever.
Right. Or
So
religion, bhajans and that whole.
yeah. So therefore, we did not have an independent music training school, or even today we don't have a very good a school like Berkeley, for example, where it teaches you music production, electronic music, and stuff like that. There are a lot of places which give you the BMUS degree, but
Yeah,
nobody tells you that there is this whole other side to it which is equally important, which you are
absolutely.
doing. You not only learn the tabla and not only did the thing, but you've gone into production, and that is purely out of your love for the the subject and your whole wholesome perception of the entire music production thing. So anyway, coming back to
We were left
my
with no choice because, apart from a tabla player, the minute I wanted to express myself as a composer, I realized that I am limited and I'm dependent on other people to come in, because I used to have programmers, people like, Raja Narayan Deb, who's a great music director in my generation. They used to program for me, but it became too cumbersome to explain something and keep communicating and depending on somebody. So I learned it, and also because it was about the sound I was looking for. It's
correct,
very difficult to explain to somebody exactly what sound I'm looking for in a kick drum or something,
correct.
yeah. So
So
go ahead.
yeah, so coming back to this thing. So film industry, the film institute was the only place where one could learn recording, and so I kind of levitated towards the music part of it, and I would take special interest in our music recording practicals, or when in any of our student film exercises where there was a content of music, I would be a little more interested in that. So after coming out of FTI, again, you had four different branches open to you. Like you could go into the engineering part of it, where you kind of went into maintenance and stuff like that. You went into production sound, or you went into post-production sound, or you went into music recording. So I wanted to go into that, but it was not really possible. It was not really, at that time, there were no openings in any studios. So I had to kind of survive. So I picked up whatever came into my thing. And fortunately, I did some good work. Like I worked on a documentary, location recording on a documentary. It gave me field experience. I worked on a film called Salam Bombay as an assistant to
Oh,
an
you worked
American
with Salam Bombay.
crew.
Wow.
Yes. So I worked in Salam Bombay, and it being a foreign production, it paid very well, so I could sustain a little more. And
Right.
then after doing that, I started getting more offers from a lot of these foreign unit productions and stuff like that. So it was very tempting to kind of, if I had taken that route, probably I would have gone into that other zone.
Meaning
But
field recording.
yeah, location
Okay.
recording
Yeah.
and film recording, basically film oriented work.
Right.
So what the institute has given you is everything. It has taught you how to record. It has taught you and all the aspects of recording.
Sure.
So, but then what happened is I realized that no, I would want to get into song or music recording. I wanted to be associated with that. Slowly, I got an opening. I joined a film post-production studio, Devanand studio called Anand Recording Studio. I worked there for
Anand
about a
Recording.
year.
Right.
Yeah, so that gave me a lot of experience in film post-production. And I used to take, again, over there, I would take special interest in recording. When the mix studio was not, when there were no mix jobs, that place would be used for recording scores. So people like Louis Banks and Bucky Lady and all these people would
So
come,
they
and
had
that
a theater kind of a place to record.
yes. So it was a huge hall. It was a massive hall. So you had the brass section sitting there, you had the string section sitting there, you had the percussion section sitting there, and by then. A lot of these, like Louis and all these people, they would come with their keyboards and stuff like that. And for me, it was like, euphoric. I kind of
It's a
was,
party.
yeah, I used to get very bored with the whole film mix concept and the way the films were being mixed and the way that they used to be dubbed. The most boring job for me is, dubbing actors. No offense, but for a dubbing engineer just to sit and hit the record button with nothing much to do is pretty boring. So this gave me a lot of excitement. I started making friends with these people, and slowly I branched out. And there was an opening in a very small music studio, and then I joined that particular studio, and that's where my journey into the song and music recording started.
This is the 90s, early 90s, or late 80s?
This is 89.
89.
89, yeah, 87 to 89, I was pretty much doing everything else. Then 89 was the year when I got into music in a full way. So there were a lot of album work, non-film album work had started in a big way at that time. So there were all these private...
Sound and all these people started coming in and promoting artists, and Atul Tiramani and the Lemon, all that entire indie pop industry boom happened.
That happened much later. That happened in the mid-90s.
Mid-90s, right.
Yeah, the early 90s was still T-Series was trying to get a foothold, and people like Gulshan Kumar would grab off somebody off the road and say, hey, come and play something for me, why don't you do this and stuff like that. So he was also kind of getting into the... But T-Series generated a lot of work. I remember doing a lot of version recordings. We used to call them version recordings. And it was very interesting because I was also trying to, this whole thing that we are talking about, trying to move my hands faster than the thing. So this little studio gave me that experience. I kind of started becoming better at my craft by dubbing. And it was such a small studio, it was very difficult to record a full-fledged song with all the musicians in that. And it was a Studer half-inch 4-track setup.
Oh God.
So it had a kick-ass sound, but then and what happens is, if you want to compensate for place, you increase the number of tracks.
Right.
So we neither had the space nor the track. So I had to do this major circus, which was trying to get people down. And I would always call the people and say, please don't forget the size of the studio. So when you're planning your thing, then call these people together. Slowly, some people who like the sound over here, they started planning out the recording in such a way that they would not spend too much time on logistics.
But was it system to comp and pre-mix and then record again, or multiply tracks in that way, or no?
No, we had to do that. We had to do bouncing and stuff like that. But what happens is, what happened in analog was every time you did a bounce, you lost a generation. So you added more tape noise, more tape pace and stuff like that.
And plus you can't go back to the original thing. It's done.
No, it's done. Yeah. But then we had ways of keeping the original thing and then try and make a copy, which I subsequently started doing. But then it was not always an option because you could not use too much of tape as well. And another thing another freaky thing used to be there was a distance between the record head, the erase head, the record head, and the playback head. So there was a distance, and the tape speed was 7.5 inches per second. So that was a slow tape speed. We used to record at a slow speed because otherwise, if I recorded at a high speed, the result would be fabulous, but then I would be using up a lot of tape.
Right.
So that was another restriction. I didn't have too many tapes in the studio, and buying tape meant spending money. So you were crunched from all sides. So that's sort of a limitation.
You can't even imagine that kind of restriction.
Yeah. So just imagine now, if you're playing, the distance between the erase head and the record head was almost about 3 to 4 inches. So when you're playing at 7.5 inches per second, so this distance was really, it almost doubled.
Yeah.
Virtually. So I could never, I always tried punching on beat, but it would never drop. I would never be able to drop that thing, because what happened is, if you punched in beat, then your erase head would get activated first and then the record head. So that distance made your punching very unmusical. So it was not even, it was somewhere between the 1/64th and the God knows the next beat, you know. So it was probably at 1/66th or something, or 1/70th. May you had to beat. So I had to train myself to not
So you have to
musically
learn
punch.
how to compensate for that latency to happen.
Yes. So that
So you have
latency,
to
what
like punch
happened?
literally 1/64th note before the beat so that it snaps
Not
into
even
rhythm.
1/64th. If it was 1/64th, at least that you would have got the practice. But it was some
Calculate.
odd figure. It was not even a,
It's a
it
time.
never,
It's a bit of time that you have to figure
it's
out.
a bit
Like
of time. And then, of course, the tempo of all the other songs would vary. It's not like you're recording a fixed tempo of a song. So
Of
you had
course.
to develop that thinking, okay, if this is the beat and this is where I'm going to punch, this is where I'm going to drop it. So this is the where it starts erasing and this is where it starts recording. So I
This is why
mastered
editing
myself.
nowadays for you is nothing. I mean, it's like you click and it happens, right? You know, it's like
Oh, now even if you punch late, then you can drag it and pull it back and it's still recorded. So
we are
for
so
us, that was discipline. And today
right.
I've become very lazy and I'm more than happy that digital has happened and saved our asses.
I'm sure.
So
Sounds like a
yeah,
nightmare.
yeah, it was. And I used to plan. And later on when we got when the number of tracks increased, like an 8-track or a 16-track recorders, which started
Right.
coming in, then I would plan it in such a way that, you know, that I would record or streamline the percussion section, and you had to do the mix while you had to do the EQs and the balancing while recording,
Body
you
time.
know, before recording. So you had to compensate for all those losses that you would generate on tape. For example, if there are percussions, you could not just have percussions. You would unnaturally increase the slight high frequencies, the brightness of those particular
Mm.
percussion instruments. When
Right.
all the musicians would sit together and then you would place the microphone, that was very important. Placing the
Yeah.
microphones and, you
That's the
know,
problem.
making sure that you do not get too much of bleed or too much of cross pickup from other
Mm.
places. So
Mm.
over a period of time, you kind of perfected this whole idea as to what kind of mics to use and what gives you the best kind of result and at what proximity and where you should place it so that you don't get phasing problems. So that's another
Right.
thing which I
Right.
faced, and it
Baby
was
problem.
like, yeah.
Yeah, you would have
So,
what, maybe 10, 8, 10 microphones in a room?
yeah, depending on the size of the room. So
No,
there
I'm
would
talking about
be,
that small studio that you were at.
yeah, even there we had, no, I had even the microphones were limited. So we had,
Mm.
like, for percussions, we had a good, like, 6, 8 microphones because there were not too many, you know, it was not this thing for too many musicians also to sit inside. So
Right.
you would
Right.
use, like, I would use one microphone and have, like, two chatis and two bayas of a dholak, for example, on that one particular mic.
Right. Right.
And on the other side, again, you had combined that other mic with the chati and baya of the tabla on the other side. So I had a kind of pattern worked out, so I could get the best of.
You know, Vishwadita, I remember recording when I was very young. I started playing in rhythm sections in Kolkata, and I was in class 4 or 5 or something. And back then there was a studio called Chitravani, and Bishwajit Sengupta used to record there. He was the engineer, and you remember those days when the dholak players had to face each other and sit,
Yes,
so that you
yes,
can mic two chatis on one side and two bayas on one side,
yes. And there
unless
was
you were
always
left-handed.
a problem if there was if he was a left-hander and stuff like that, then you would
Exactly,
scratch your
exactly.
head and say, now how do I get this guy right?
So I need
So I
another left
had
hand.
to.
You know?
No, the other funny part was, like, there were two guys sitting, like, you know, one behind the other.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah, exactly.
you're facing me, and there's another guy sitting behind you who's facing me, just because
Yeah,
you know,
and
you had two different this thing. So it was weird combinations. I mean, if
yeah, yeah. I remember those days. I mean, I used to do like a
yeah,
little bit of playing in that time, but you know, recording sections of instruments is, you know, still. I mean, the figuring out of where to place the player, how many of them to place, and then how to mic that group. And you know, when you're recording strings, tell me a little bit about that experience, like recording string sections and orchestras that you've done. Like uh,
yeah.
you
See
close
what
mic,
happened.
and then you get some of the room, then you pick up. I mean, how do you distribute that, and how does that work?
See, close miking was a very close miking was a very it's not, it was not possible to close mic a string section. It is not possible.
Right.
So I used to have about 4 microphones. I had, like, a Schweppes stereo microphone on top, and I had, like, U89s or U87s on the sides, and I had the AKG 414s on the cellos. And we didn't have too much of double bass back in the day because there were not too many players, but we did have an occasional bass player. But it was very interesting to mic these guys because when they sat together and they played as a section, then you kind of, when they did the rehearsals or they kind of did the tuning, you kind of set up everything. It was a whole exercise. If I had the string section tomorrow morning, then today I would get all the headphones checked. I would place everything everywhere. I had a place where, where I would be placing the violas, a section where I would be placing the cellos, and of course the major string section. And sometimes it used to be very funny because there's an order in the string section, the first row, the second row, and the third row. Because sometimes what I used to do was make the first row sit in the third row, which to them was like, dude,
that's
you're the
really
first
weird
row.
for them.
We're the first row guys. I mean, you've disturbed a certain hierarchy. And
because got first violins and second violins.
Yeah. So then I explained to them, you see, I'm trying to mic it in this way, so I'm getting the best result on the first row. I'll miss out on you guys because I need to capture something, and I'm limited in terms of certain mics and things like that. So the best kind of results I wanted was, mic these guys, make the first row sit probably on the third row.
Right.
Record the first row over there. So I would get a kind of an off axis from the second and the third rows. But I got the direct sound of the first row, which the guys whom I made, I placed them on the third row, for example. So you had to do these little bit of combinations in order to get a certain kind of a result. And of course, the cellos, I would mic the cellos in such a way so that, they would sit around the microphones, and there would be like four. Usually there were like about four cellos would be the thing, and they would go on separate tracks. The violins would go on a separate track. The violas would go on separate tracks. So this was how we kind of did live string section.
String sections. That is amazing. Yeah. I was listening to an interview with Alan Myerson where he talks about recording Inception. And an orchestra of 120 people. I think they have these remote control preamps, which is basically what he uses to balance the section while the recording will happen, because he cannot possibly take the time to go into the room and fix something and then come back and say you have to play again, because we're talking about an orchestra that is costing $300,000 an hour to be there. So he has to, by the time the orchestra is ready to record, he has to be ready, and his gear has to be set up and everything has to be in order. So I'm wondering whether you have faced pressures like that from the studio.
There's always pressure of time, though it was not as bad as that. I mean, as bad for us as that, because by then we had become thugs. So I knew the whole process. I knew that this is this thing, and these are the string sections, and there have been and by then what had also happened was they would sequence strings.
Right.
So you knew the string parts, that these are the places that you would come, you mark them and you would record them. Right. So I knew the section. It was not, so they were there for a certain period of time, and usually the time taken was the time taken from their side more than from our side. So I made sure that we were not responsible for, spending that much of time, because what happens in a recording studio is, if the director or the producer comes late, it's fine. If the music director comes late, it's fine. If the musician even comes late, it's fine. But if the engineer is late, then you have a death penalty of sorts.
Yeah.
So we had to
be
there. Yeah, no, but then that was the system, and that still is the system in many cases.
Yeah.
Because we had to be there right from the start. Otherwise, nobody would be able to hear what was happening. If you didn't open up the whole thing, nobody knew what was happening, and it was a direct coordination with you. And if you're not there, then and if you're not prepared, then it's a huge problem. And like I told you before, that every minute counts. So from my side, I could not be late. I had to be reaching the studio an hour earlier, and the recording engineer and his team always were the last to leave.
Sure.
So, and last to leave because you're getting ready for the next day. The next day is going to be another elaborate process. So we just kind of, to make our lives easier, we would, balance everything, check everything. So you had added things about, and there would always be some headphone which is not working, or some time code which is not coming, or some latency somewhere. So there were all these little technical glitches would also come up. But then you did all your rehearsals so that while recording, you didn't have these kind of issues. So and what happens is, by the time you are senior enough to, record a whole string section, when people are, giving you that huge responsibility, that means you have achieved a certain level of experience or seniority in order to conduct the whole thing. So, and it's very unfortunate actually that this whole string section and the rhythm section, which was fantastic in Bombay, have just vanished almost. The newer generation of musicians are not taking up violins, are not taking up percussions, are not taking up these kind of things. So people started moving to Chennai, and now people are doing it abroad.
Yeah, that is very sad, because the softwares and the orchestral packages that are coming out are improving every day, and people are just it's sampling is one thing that has it's a conflicting theory. Like every time I feel like, I've done that, ridiculously enough, I have done that with my own tabla.
Right.
I avoided going to the studio and playing something again specifically for this piece, because I had a sample from another song that I played in which could perfectly fit into this. And I thought, there's not so much of budget. So, this is a concern, because like the minute it comes into your laptop and it becomes like you can sit home, I'm competing with guys who are nailing songs overnight. They're programming the whole thing with background vocals, this, that, everything. And they're doing it all sample based. So then for me to tell a producer that I have to go and record this particular thing and you have to give me the money to do
it's
that.
It's a cost issue.
It's a cost issue.
It's a huge cost issue. But then we had a very interesting thing. You just reminded me of something that when we used to do these recordings, these small private recordings, then there was this one very smart composer who's a very big singer now. I'll not name him, but he used to do a lot of Punjabi albums. And and the Punjabi album was like, mostly the whole pattern was so it was complete bhangra. So like from song one to song this thing. What he used to do was he used to say that, okay, now we've got this, we've mixed this whole thing. Now let's do one thing, keep the entire percussion track as it is. And now he would change the entire song and the entire arrangement. So essentially it was like the forefather of sampling. So we used to use the recorded material of the previous song and use it for another song, where the entire arrangement changed. But the thing was more or less, the breaks were more or less similar.
But then the tempo would have to be the same, no?
Well, the tempo was the same. The tempo was the same, and towards the end, we used to call the end the coda. So towards the end, it kind of picked up, and it was a formula. And I used to joke, like, in those days when you had these music television on the music-based programs on television, when it was a Punjabi song, you could switch from one channel to the other and it would be in beat. And you could switch from one channel to the other in complete beat, and you could catch another beat in another song in another channel. So that was a format. That was like a complete format. But that was a thing. So eventually that boiled down to sampling.
Sampling, yeah. So that's why, and also it is so cumbersome. But we all of these things are coming from America, or they're coming from the West. All of these orchestral packages and East-West and all these packages that have come. But in the US, there is still so much of orchestral recording. There are so many symphony orchestras that are playing, and I know it's expensive, but they're actually, and it makes a difference. It really makes a difference.
Of course
there is no way. I've recorded cello. I've had the good fortune of recording cello with an incredible cellist. He's currently with the New York Phil. He's Albanian guy. His name is Ruben Kodeli. There is no way to, like just the dynamics and the very touch of the bow. There are certain staccato hits and maybe orchestral bold gestures that you could possibly replace with samples, but the actual playing of an orchestra, I mean, like.
No, it's not possible because here, like I told you, our biggest platform or revenue generation or revenue, the place where you would make a lot of money was the film industry.
Right.
So, unlike in the West, where, if he's not playing for a session, then he's got several other places where he can go and play. He can go and play in the Philharmonic Orchestra, he can go and play on some private thing, or he can have his own show. And even if it's a string quartet, it'll have an audience.
Oh, absolutely.
If it's a string quartet, or if it's a small kind of this thing, it'll have audience. So the guy is actually quite busy. I'm talking about like good musicians, and they'll never go hungry. So what happens is that you have these guys, they are going and performing. There are other avenues, and there's this huge thing called royalty. So as a musician, you're earning even when you've played in that album. That royalty just comes to you. So it is not a question of survival. For us, it is a question of, the string section, a few private albums having 5 or 6 violins. And then suddenly when all these samples come in and they take over, and people just have realized, because part of it is also our production and the kind of violins that we have and stuff. So there were very few people who could even make the violins and the string section sound, program that in such a way. I'll compliment Salim for that, because he would, Salim Sulaiman. Salim was very good at programming strings. He would play it as though, like, the whole string section with the expression and all that, it required a certain level of smartness in programming strings. So he had this feel of doing that. So very few people actually utilized that particular feel. Then, of course, when you had the live strings recorded on it, and it became like really fantastic. You had the body, and the slight imperfections from the live strings would make it like really good. So unfortunately, what is happening is that only a select set of composers who can afford it are doing it today. They would say that, I would want to go and record this. The unfortunate part is that we don't have any big studios left anymore to accommodate a violin section, even if there was a violin section. So that's the very sad part. It has not been revived. Hopefully in the future it will, when people start getting a little more demanding and a little more sensitive and a little more,
sensitive
sensitive and developed sensibilities, where you have, like, you are having filmmakers coming in, you are having like young directors coming in with good ideas and stuff like that. But you need the will from the producer side, who would say that, do I need to spend that much of money for this? It's the will. It's not that there's never any budget. It's just that, you've allocated a certain amount of budget, and how much can you? And so by the time the film comes to the post-production stage, the budget has already run dry. So there's hardly any
shootings with biryani, and then we are left with moody chanachuri. Like that's
correct.
That is
the unfortunate part. Now they don't realize that this could really enhance the film. A good score could really bring a lot of richness to this whole score. So we'll get there. It's just that we are, the right kind of guys have to move into the right kind of places.
And also, we are the only country in the world that calls the film score background score. So once you term something as background, it's very difficult to convince somebody to spend a lot of money on it. I mean, I'm surprised. I mean, all the films I have done here, I mean, the amount of money that has been spent in throwing parties for no reason. Shooting pack up ho gaya party, first day this thing party. So, like, I'm just saying that, like, cut down on 1 or 2 parties and, let's go and record a string section.
So that's what I'm trying to say. It needs to have that will. That will has to be there.
It has to be the prioritization has to be there.
Yeah, and sorry.
No, I was just saying that I did one film with my brother, Mayookh, and I told him that, look, if this is what you're looking for, then I need to go to New York and do this. And this is for a Bengali film, not like a high budget blockbuster or anything. He took a bunch of money and he gave it to me, and he said, go do it.
Yeah.
And
see, that's what I'm talking about.
He doesn't throw parties. That's the thing. Like, he doesn't spend on,
spends on the right places, right things.
So that adds to the film. That takes the film somewhere else. The minute that cello comes in and that viola comes in, it just, I mean, so that's the, that's, well, we'll get there, like you said. BISHWADEEP, I have another different kind of question, and I will be taking questions from anybody who is willing to ask and has questions. I'm sure all of you have tons of things to ask the master. As a mixing engineer, you have worked with various different, starting from Shubhaji's Apke Sawan to Silk Route and Duba Duba, and then films like Porinita and Devdas and all of these, like wide variety of things, and so many different genres, so many different kinds of voices, like starting from Shubhaji to Shreya Ghoshal to Kavita Krishnamurti to Monali, all of that huge range. On Indit, yes, that was take one. On is asking which film that was. So, is there such a thing now? Is there such a thing as a BISHWADEEP Chatterjee mix, like a philosophy?
See, I'll go back to this because what happens is the sound is not mine. The sound is yours. As a composer, as a producer, as a band member, or as a band, the sound is yours. That is what you're generating. Like Silk Route. When I heard them rehearsing, I was like blown because I have not heard something like this in India. And when they were performing, when they were kind of rehearsing with themselves, and this three guys, young guys who had come from Himachal, some far up mountain, very spaced out guys, and completely this in so much in contrast with the big city and Bombay and its thing like that. So when they came, so they were completely spaced out in this whole environment. But when they sat down and they were jamming and they were kind of rehearsing with the whole thing, for me, that was like brilliant. I just kind of knew that, okay, this is how I'm going to approach this recording. So what happens is like the sound is yours. So I cannot say that, this is my mix. That's a lot of people say that, but then it depends on the kind of song that you're working on, and whether it's rock and roll, whether it's film, Bollywood, whether it's Hindustani classical. So we get to work on all these kind of different genres, if you may, and then you kind of try and understand that this is the space and how you could contribute to this thing. I would want to take away all the technical headache from you in order to sit and actually try and give you a kind of a mix. Now, one example was like, back in the day, it was very difficult to convince people because it was a set. They had a set sound. They had a set formula. They would say that, I would want this sort of a recording. And I did not like that particular sound of strings, which was like really oversaturated, not just saturated. It was like, it was distorted beyond repair. But that was the sound that they liked, and that was the string section of Bollywood that they liked, and they expected you to kind of come out with that. And for me, as a young person in the industry and with different set of aesthetics, a different this thing, for me, I just could not, get into that sort of a thing. How could I destroy a string section in that sense? So I remember, like in these small recording sessions, so all these small recording sessions, the guy, the music director, so-called music director, was often a musician who would play for some big composer at that time. But in his downtime, he would do like private albums and stuff like that, and he would try and mimic those kind of sounds. So he would try and say that I want a string section like that. I say I don't want to name the studios now, but then वहाँ पे जैसे होता है, I want to do the thing. So for me, I was like, sir, लेकिन वो थोड़ा distorted. हाँ, वही चाहिए. I want that distortion. I want that.
वही चाहिए.
हाँ. So it was difficult. It was like, dude, don't waste my time. Yeah, just get over with it and just give me what I'm asking for. What are you getting into?
There was a period in the late 80s and 90s. Early 90s.
So then,
vocals, tons of like daring violins, which are like
there was a set pattern of tape reticulation that was there for any kind of reverb. So whether it was like, you just control the feedback with the return faders, but that was just tape reverb, and they did not experiment. By then a lot of these digital reverb units had started coming in, but then it was something which is not accepted yet by the industry. So what happened in a film like Hum Dil De Chuke Sanam was I kind of took over, and I had the support of Ismail Darbar, the composer, and Sanjay Bansali, the director. And we sat down and we planned the whole thing and said, let's, we're trying to do something different, then let's just go ahead and do something different. I don't want to do that sort of a thing. So we are going to have depth, we are going to have a lot of punch, we are going to have a lot of things, but we need to be broad, clean, and, it needed to sound really good. So let's not get into that sort of this thing. So what we did was, I recorded the strings, balanced the strings in that way, blended the electronic strings along with the live strings to create a particular kind of an effect, blended the skin percussions, the Indian percussions, along with the electronic percussions and drums and stuff like that to program stuff in order to, really create a thick sort of a thing. And something which was not very common in those days was, like back in the day, it was like there were 5 or 6 studios, big studios, where they would record the songs for the film. So you would end up going once to this studio, maybe Mehboob or to Sunny or to Bombay Lab or to, somewhere. And then you would get your mixes from those places, compile it and hand it over to the music company. The production guy would just do that. So there was no concept of mastering or, there was no concept of a kind of a consistency between the songs in one album. So I was very particular and I said, Sanjay, I want to mix all the songs. Now, of course, I wanted to not only mix all the songs, but my other reason for doing that was bringing in a consistency. When one person sits and does the entire mix, then there is automatically a sort of consistency. I'm not saying because I do it, it could be anyone.
No, but there's one connected.
There is one thought process, there is one particular tonality, there's one particular sound. So I would tell them, I would not have the studio may not have the studio free because tomorrow when you're asking for it, but make sure that you go to this particular studio, you record it on this. We used to record on 2-inch 24 track with Dolby SR on each channel in those days. So I would tell them, record it on that and bring that tape to me. And try and make sure when you go and record over there, try and make sure that you don't process any sounds. So that it gives me the flexibility to sit and EQ and reverb and all that stuff. So, and they actually did that. So I made sure with Prakash Patel, who was, and Yogesh, who were Ismail's right and left hands. And they were the arrangers and they, in today's terms, I would say producers. So they kind of were really helpful in, they understood the whole process. And we were part of that generation where we were trying to make a difference. And we wanted to do away with that old typical Bollywood sound.
So, I think Hum Dil De Chuke Sanam is the film where there was tremendous amount of Indian musicality in the score by itself, but there was an extremely futuristic, ultra-modern kind of gloss and balance and soothing. There was a soothing effect, like none of the high frequency stuff, like the high pitch staccato violin, there were like pizzicatos going on, but none of them would hurt the ear.
No.
Which was such a pleasure. That is a breakthrough. That job, BISHWADEEP, is like, I mean,
so
you
for me, that was
we looked at things.
Yeah, so for me, that also broke another myth. Ki, bada sound ke liye bade studio mein jana padega. So that was programmed. And when people would come and ask me, where did you record it? I said, here. And it was a very small studio again. So how did you manage it? I said, we have big equipment. Forget, like, it may not be physically sound, but our equipment is like seriously big. We had like Dolby, and we had Otari MTR 90 Mark II with 2-inch 24 tracks and with Dolby SR on every track. So what are you talking about? And I also used to lock it with, in those days you had the high 8 and the ADAT, so whichever. So I had the high 8, I had an ADAT, so we used to record, lock that. And by then I had a workstation called the SADI had come in. So I was locking all these guys, and by the time Vedas happened, we had a bigger studio and I had Pro Tools and the works. But over here, we still were working at with a limited workstation.
There was no Pro Tools.
No. So then what happened was we mixed all that. I had several reverb and delay units. So I had the Lexicon PCM80, I had the TCM 5000, I had the TC1120, I think, delay unit. and I had the Eventide harmonizer 3500. So these were the stuff that I
So you
had, some
have a lot
very
of
good
outboard
reverb
gear.
units
I mean,
that I
that
had.
is fantastic.
Yeah, and I had automation on my board. So
Now,
I would sit and I would actually sit and with several passes, work on those automations, work on the EQs, work on this thing, and it brought a consistency to the whole thing. And I would record, like if I were to use the PCM for strings, for example, and later I needed to have a different patch for say the sitar or the sarod or the guitars, then I would record the reverb return of the strings on the workstation.
oh,
So that way I would double up my outboard processors.
right, right. And you would
So
have control each of them individually.
and I had control over the whole thing. And
Right.
so that is how we kind of this thing, because and we used to all the recall and all the settings, my assistants would kind of sit
Write
and
them down.
work and write
Yeah.
and even draw diagrams as to which thing. So whenever the next
We've done
morning or
this,
the next
taken
session,
photographs of the SSL desk and actually gone back and made the recall happen. For Tony
yes,
Maserati, we did that in one session.
yeah,
Very, very, and if we messed one thing up, he would not even look at the board. He would hear it and he would go like, "No, this is not right." You know, like
right.
so.
So
Yeah.
that always happens, even today when, when you're saying, you're wondering why is it sounding different? Then you realize that, okay, this is not the mix. Then what happened? Oh, I forgot to copy the automation. My assistant would say, I forgot to copy the automation of that. Suppose I placed the song on the different timeline and say, why are this thing's not right? Because I remember working on these moves and you remember, I remember. I
You
remember,
remember,
and this is what I know this thing because you feel it. It's a very
of
physical
course.
thing because over a period of time, what happens is it's not your knowledge of the things that you're working on. It is you have grown. The sound has grown into you. Like a
Right.
musician, a very good musician, the musical instrument is an extension of his this thing. I remember, good musicians, they're in command of their instrument. Like when you're sitting on the tabla, your body language changes because
Sure.
you are by now an authority on the tabla. You know how to play the tabla. You know
It's a
how to
part
make a
of my
difference.
body. I'm just
It's a
so
part
used
of your, yeah. So for us also, that is the thing. And the years are something that I'm always, even in your subconscious level, you're kind of always hearing things. You know exactly. So you have a snapshot in your mind already.
right, right.
So that comes with time. That comes with a period. Oh, this is not the mix. Where are this thing? Why is the thing not happening? Then you realize that okay, that particular plugin has been bypassed, or that
Right.
particular thing has been. So you are walking in that because you know mentally this is what you have in mind, and you have worked towards that. So you cannot. It's very rare that you will not notice these sort of things.
Absolutely.
Sorry,
Absolutely.
so what was happening is that so you are sitting, you wanted to do this thing. I did the mix, and what would happen was at the end of the session, Sanjay would call up, says, when can I come? And it was unheard of, man. How could you mix a song for 3 days? I mean, you finish the song and then you just mix it and give it, man. That was the thing. So, and here I was like, I was having none of that. I'm going to say that I'm going to say when I'm ready with the mix. So I
You
would
add that luxury.
so,
Wow.
yeah, no, I demanded it. I kind of wanted it.
I have to stop you because this session
Yeah,
is going to end in 1 minute because that is the
yeah,
limit on Instagram. So what we can do, because there's a lot more to talk about.
yeah,
What we can do is I will end the session. I will go live again and we go through the same process and continue. You send me a
sure.
request, same thing. Okay,
Yeah,
just give me 1 minute. Okay.
okay.
Stay tuned
Yeah,
with us with the audio grandmaster BISHWADEEP Chatterjee. We'll be right back, and please join us again. We're having a really fun, really insightful conversation, and there are some questions which I will take in the next session. Please join us back. Just get up a couple of minutes. And we are live once again. Welcome back to the Unlocked Jam Room. We are having a wonderful conversation with the audio grandmaster, mastermind, maestro, par excellence, one of the greatest audio engineers that I have heard in the world, in my opinion. Because if you are one of the greatest in Bollywood, you are definitely one of the greatest in the world. Because Bollywood is certainly produces some of the greatest music that happens in the planet. Welcome back, Indrayud. I see you. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much for being here and supporting us. We want questions from you. And Bishwadita, please join me back on the live. We're back here again. Such an soon as he joins. Just connecting.
Yeah, hi
Welcome
again.
back, Vishwadeep. Welcome back. Welcome back.
Thanks. I had a quick smoke break. So,
Okay.
Actually, I just wanted to finish. I just wanted to finish that
Please.
Alhamdulillah Jahan story. So
Absolutely.
what we did to bring in the consistency, then what happened is I decided that after finishing the entire mix properly, and then Sanjay was like, "It's not fair, boss." I mean, when I played it to him, they kind of stood up and said, "This is not what I was expecting." There were parts of it which you could never hear that came out, and so he was like completely blown by this whole thing. So then, and he told me that it's not fair, man. So I said, why? He said, you gave me a rough mix for the shoot. I could have utilized these elements. I said, you didn't give me the
Ah,
time.
kya baat hai.
So
Very
you
true.
didn't give me the time. And but then he was maha thrilled. And then the next stage, the bombshell that I had dropped was, we are going to master it in London.
Ah.
So it was something which was very unheard of in Bollywood at that time. So then we
Tell me
went
something
and
for our audio students. A lot of people have asking. Padmakali Banerjee was asking, what message do you have for young sound designers? We will get to that in a bit, but just tell me something which is very
she's
important.
my sister. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll get to that in a moment, because that is kind of like a finishing touch kind of question. But
Yeah.
I want to say that, I have a very hard time. The two songs of mine that you've heard, that you've liked, Dillana and Jaja, are both mastered by Tom Quinn at Sterling. Tom Quinn is a multiple Grammy-winning mastering engineer, and the difference between a really good mix and then a really good master of that mix is huge. It's paramount.
Yeah.
So can you please tell us? What the importance of mastering is and why it's necessary, so that all of our musician friends can hear about it, and we can keep pushing the agenda of mastering something.
Yeah. So mastering is a very aesthetic process, because the guy I had gone to master with was in Townhouse. I'm forgetting his name, unfortunately, but he was a very good mastering engineer. He understood the whole thing. It's an aesthetic process, because it's not about tweaking the highs and boosting the lows and making
No,
it
no, no.
sound like crunchy and pumpy and stuff like that. No, mastering is if he is, yeah.
Those are the limiter presets, right?
Yeah,
Crunchy and
so if you are boosting the highs on the higher percussions, on the hi-hats, on the manjiras, or the any whichever high percussions are there, it should not affect the vocals. The vocals suddenly should not become sibilant.
right,
So
right,
so you have to be. It's a very this thing, and they work on a stereo track. It's not like they
right.
don't work on your mix. So
Absolutely.
it's a combination of compression, a little bit of stereo spacing, broadening, and
Hmm.
equalization. Equalization,
Yeah.
very minute equalization, where
Hmm.
you will not be necessarily be able to hear it, because there are presets at 20
Overall EQ,
kilohertz. There
right,
are
right.
presets at 20 kilohertz. Now, even a young guy cannot hear over 17
15,
kilohertz.
yeah.
That's
Within
that's
17 is
a yeah. So these are the things, that the parameters. Then rounding off the low ends. It's very important to understand how to round off the low ends. So these are the things that he did for that. And you did an A/B comparison, and you could make out the difference, and suddenly it brought out the sheen. It brought out it polished the whole thing. And of course, it brought a consistency in terms of levels between the songs. Because if I'm mixing a song today, and if I'm mixing a second song, like say after 10 days, or if I'm mixing a third song after like 2 months, then we are a human mind. So
right.
when I lay all those tracks, when I lay them side by side, then I realize there is a little disparity between
Yeah,
song one and song two and song six. So
sure.
what is happening is, you're trying to bring in a certain consistency, a certain tonal characteristic. So mastering
Absolutely.
is very important when you're lining up an
Making album.
analogy. An analogy I'll give is, like, if this is a maroon T-shirt that I'm wearing, and if you're shooting this maroon T-shirt over a period of say 2 months, then the color will look different
Yeah, because you're
of
washing.
day one, or day 15, or day 20, or day
Right.
60. So there'll be slightly different shades of maroon that you will see when you line up these visuals. And this can happen because the photographer is lighting it up in such a way, but in a certain way.
Right.
And he is perceiving it in a different way today. Tomorrow I'll perceive it in another way.
Right.
day after I'll perceive it another way. So when you string these shots together, you realize that there are various shades of maroon. So you pick out the best shade of maroon. Today it's digitally possible to pick out the best shade of maroon and paste it across this thing so that it looks very consistent.
Which is why we have DI color correction in film.
Yes, that is what DI is all about. So we are doing that. We have been doing that in audio. And that's how it brings a certain level of it really lifts up the entire thing. It brings a complete shine to the final product that you're doing.
The final gloss.
The gloss, as we say. But having said that, when I started doing that, then a lot of guys who started making a beeline for London, and they would go to the cheapest studios in Soho and in garage studios and come back with the label key mastered in London. Now, what I was trying to tell these guys is, boss, if a mastering will not improve your mix.
Yeah.
If it's a bad mix, it'll sound like a very good bad mix.
Very good bad mix.
Yeah.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
It will not improve the mix, because he will try and bring out the best kind of sound in the mix that you are providing to him. It cannot. I cannot do a good mix. Yeah, I cannot do a good mix if the music production is erratic. I can't do it. And in our day, what we used to do is we used to get into music production also without getting credited for it. Because then you realize that, I need it, because one song in Untitled Chapter was Dholi Taro Dhol Baje. That was a fantastic song.
Yeah.
But what I had told Sanjay is that I want to see the trial of the film before mixing the songs, because I just want to get a vibe. When I saw Dholi Taro, I said, dude, you've got all these guys rolling into the frame with huge, massive drums, and we don't have anything in the audio to complement that. So if it plays on screen with just a djembe solo, and Nitin Shankar had done a fantastic job of, doing the rhythm arrangement for the entire song, of all the songs. So Nitin and I got together, and I told Nitin that, we need to have a downbeat. We need to punctuate the downbeat with some really heavy thump,
big drums.
kind of big drum downbeat. We needed to have that, because all the accents and all the ones had to come out in a low kind of way. And then people were still reeling with loudness and stuff like that. We try and blast, the music directors would try and blast the whole thing to try and impress the producers and stuff like that. And you're trying to say, boss, that's not necessary. The reason is that you're not giving it enough low end. The moment there is adequate low end, you won't need to blast it. So here was this thing, and when the low end started coming, it lifted the whole thing into one boom. It gave a solid low end, and it gave a solid depth to the whole thing.
For low end, and by the way, Tejan,
for that kind of a song,
Naran Majumdar is here, and he's saying hello to you.
Hello, sir.
Maestro Tejan Naran Majumdar. The thing is that I had a whole separate question about Dholi Taro Dhol Baje and songs like Dola Re Dola and Mar Dala. You have handled huge mixes of rhythm sections where there are, 50 ghungroos going on and big drums going on, dholaks, and I can't even imagine the number of things. Now, the things that the sections that you've handled, I've seen in a song like Dholi Taro Dhol Baje, is like you have several high frequency characters in the song, which may be a combination of tambourines, ghungroos, shakers, hi-hats, all of whom have different timbre. They have different characters, but they're very close in the frequency range. And I have seen that you have hard panned things, like there are ghungroos happening far on the left, and there's absolutely like very little ghungroo on the right. And then the hi-hats are more or less on the right if there's a hi-hat programmed hi-hat pattern. Now, can you tell me the philosophy behind doing that? Or is it that I'm just hearing that in the album? Because if you hard pan like that in the film mix, then, if there is a certain high frequency character on the far right hand, then a guy sitting on the left hand side of the theater won't even hear it.
Yeah.
So what is your philosophy behind that? How you place these frequencies, and how do you get separation at that level?
Very good question, Mayookhb. The thing is, the album mix and the film mix are slightly different. They have to be slightly different in terms of the spatiality of it, if you call it the spatial elements. So what happened in having coming back to the thing, like probably I'm a different person today. I've aged a little more. My perceptions have changed. The sensibilities have changed. The audio
No,
systems
but
have
you're
changed.
getting younger. You haven't aged. Come on.
My perception, or if I had to do a Hamdillah Ke Sanam mix today or a Devdas mix today, it would be different from what I had done back in the day.
Of course, of course.
So because it has got a lot more sophisticated, people have got a lot more smarter, and this thing. But technology is improved, and so there could be layers, there could be far more things that would, there would be far more transparency, because we were limited with a lot of things back in the day. But I did have these guys sitting on the left and the right, and there was a slight this thing. So there were a lot of other things that were happening in between. So between the tambourines and the shakers on the left and the right, there were these other things which were subtly panned, like the mid percussions, the low percussions, the other harmonic elements like the guitars and the things. So there were a combination of all that, which was probably the reason why I decided that it would be done that way. Now, coming to Mar Dala, for example, was one song in Devdas. And when I was mixing it for the film, it suddenly felt very inadequate. Now, let me tell you one thing. When you're mixing, inadequate sonically compared to the massive visuals that were being shown. So in Devdas, when I realized that there was like hundreds of dancers doing this major thing, then just the ghungroos over there felt inadequate. They were very nice for a stereo mix. When I'm hearing the song, I don't need to touch that. It was really complete. There was no thing. But when you're watching a film, then your mix becomes a little less musical and it becomes a little more cinematic.
Sure.
So what happens is that I remember I got Sajad and two of the percussionists, two other percussionists of this thing. Sajad was Ismail's assistant. So I made them sit. I called up, first of all, when I saw that visual, I called up Vikram Motwani, who was assisting Sanjay, the director Vikram Motwani. He was assisting Sanjay at that time. So I called up Vikram and I said, Vikram, we need, मेरे को 25 kilo घुंघरू लाके थे. So these were the very, so he was like, 25 kilo घुंघरू. I just needed a lot and I didn't know how to quantify the whole thing. So I kind of told him कि मेरे को 25 kilo चाहिए. He got the message. Intelligent guy, very good director. So he immediately got almost like a truckload of ghungroos and he placed it on our console table, and it was a huge kind of a pile.
Right.
So then I sifted all the different shades of ghungru. There were the high ghungroos, there were the mid ghungroos, and there were the low ghungroos, which a lot of these dancers use.
Yeah.
So there were three types of ghungroos. I kind of, made three parts out of them. I made three people sit and wear the ghungroos on their hands, right up to their shoulders. And so I made like one center guy, one left and one right. So I made the low guy sit in the center with the low ghungroos wearing the low ghungroos. And I told them, boss, just shake with the dancers in beat. So when the visuals went on and when the song started, they started shaking and they started kind of kach, and
so
all these
dubbed the ghungroos to the picture, which is a reverse process.
Picture. Yeah.
Oh, God.
So then on the already existing song tracks, now I had my entire mix laid out for the studio. I just kind of adapted it now to the 5.1 surround. So my automation, everything was running as it was. It was just these additional tracks were now coming on.
Right.
So I had these ghungroos playing. So these guys, they were like, it was a funny sight seeing these three guys shaking this thing, and it was a funny sight. But then the sound we got was tremendous. I had a left ghungru, I had a center ghungru, and a right ghungru.
Right.
And that cluster, it's not about raising volume. If I have a pair of ghungrus, if I raise the volume, it will not sound like 50 dancers. It will not sound like that. So I needed to have all these guys sit over there, and I dubbed the entire thing. Right. And then I laid all these ghungrus and the thing. The song was like playing out nice, but then that brilliance was not coming in, and that came when the ghungrus came up.
Absolutely. So, I remember watching Devdas in the theater, and that song felt like I'm surrounded by ghungrus. It's like from all sides. And you know, what happens is that if there is a disconnect between what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing in the film, neither does the song work, and somehow the film also falls flat. I wanted to ask you something very because your mixes are so clear. There is so much of clarity. And I'm talking about sonic clarity, not just from a point of I can hear everything, but everything is sitting in a certain part of the spectrum. The things that need to be wide, if there are guitars, the guitars are wide enough. There are no disturbing frequencies. And I can hear like almost like a band playing in front of me, where I can see people sitting at various corners. So just tell me 2-3 things: sidechain compression, multi-band compression, EQing, panning, and automation. What is your combination? What is your approach to using these basic core elements to achieve the kind of clarity and also highlighting the things that need to be highlighted without cranking them throughout the song?
See, what I concentrate on, first of all, my whole thing about concentrating was the source should give me at least 75% of what I'm asking for. So my microphone techniques, my miking techniques itself would, I would sit with the tabla guy, and I had two favorite guys in tabla, and most of the songs that I would record either for Shantanu Moitra or Ismail or whoever, I would want these two guys to come with their tabla because I just loved their tablas. They had a very big baya, and they kind of I loved the sound because it sounded really thick and it sounded full. And before doing the tabla, I would request these guys, can you tune the baya a little more, less? Can you, drop the pitch it down a little more? So they would sit and, and I would like to name these guys, Sanju Sen and Sanjay Vyas. Unfortunately, Sanjay Vyas is not there with us anymore, but Sanju Sen is there. He was a brother.
I would like to be one of those tabla players who are your favorite tabla players. Okay.
So you're a composer. It's your call now. Okay. So, I had these guys, and of course, the chati of the tabla, you tune to the scale of the song. That's another thing. But I made it a point to tune the baya not only of the tablas but also of the dholak. Pretty much like how you would tune the bass drum.
A kick drum.
A kick drum in a drum set. And I would also sometimes ask them to loosen or tighten a little more because the source has to come out really good.
Absolutely.
And so recording those tablas, and once I had those tablas in place, then I knew that I'm sorted. Then I don't have to do a lot of working and reworking on those kind of sounds. So my original capture of the tabla and the dholak, which I miss in most of the samples today. I don't get that depth. I don't get that transparency. I don't get the layers. I should be able to see all this. I'm not able to see all this in this thing because usually they have not, when they have sampled it, they've just sampled it as a group without taking too much of this thing. For me, it was important. It was important to capture each and every instrument. Now, so tabla, dholak, duff, all these instruments, one thing I never did was employ compression because I would lose dynamics. I would lose dynamics. I would lose that soft tabla tone to the higher slide, that kind of a thing that, these kind of progressions that they would do on the mixing. I would miss out on all that.
Just like manage the...
No compression while recording.
Wow.
I always have a bus compression in my stereo, but I very conservatively used it. And I've seen one thing that if I have automated and if I've mixed the whole thing very well, then I don't need to have the compression unless I need a little tightness in the whole thing. I do use compression. I do use this thing, but I'm very, I don't like to use it in the percussion because for me, it seems like it crushes the whole thing unless it is deliberately required, unless you're trying to deliberately make a sound by giving over compression and doing the thing, unless you're trying to make a tone like that, unless you're making a
big bright percussion section, you want to give them as much space as possible.
Unless you're doing a deliberate thing like a typical tone of that London Underground kind of a dhol kind of a tone where you're making. That's a different story. I mean, that's something that you're doing. But in this sort of a thing, I would always feel very restricted in terms of compressing all this. But I do now, because today we have very good plugins for compression and stuff like that. I do use compression, and sparingly. I still prefer the outboard gear. I still have the bus compressor, and if so required, if I'm so badly listening on that, then I pass it through the compressor for any particular thing. Though my compression is on pretty much everything, but on a very
Minimal.
soft level,
Right. But
minimal
what
kind
is
of a
your
level.
go-to
And if
compressor
you're
for on a rhythm section or drums?
Uh, I like to use the wave compressor. I don't use multiband too much on percussions. Uh, Actually, for percussions and rhythm, I very rarely use compression. I use channel strip, which is there in DigiDesigner, which is quite nice.
Yeah.
And if at all, then I run it through the SSL. I like the SSL bus compressor, which also comes as a plugin.
Right.
That's also very nice. But then I very sparingly, I use it more as an expander actually. So I can make up gain ko thoda bada ke, I kind of bring that broadness in the whole thing and just give a little bit of compression.
Just
Side
give
chaining.
management of the content instead of squashing. I mean,
Sorry.
two different ways of thinking about it. I'm saying, it's more of management of the sound and bringing it into one sort of tightly knit unit as a unit as opposed to mangling the sound,
Yes, I don't want it to, of course, I don't want it to spread and be all over the place. You just need a little tightness. And when you're acoustically recording these, especially acoustic instruments, then you have to be very careful with your compression.
Absolutely.
As far as sidechain is concerned, it depends on what kind of accompaniment you have with your bass drum and your bass guitar, or a pad where you need to kind of drop the beat whenever the kick comes in. So sidechaining is something, usually I have seen that I have not run into that many those kind of problems, because that is much more, when live or when the band plays, those kind of issues start happening more than on a film kind of a recording where the production itself to start off is smart enough. So, but then I do things on it. I copy this thing. If I need to boost a certain high or a certain this thing, then I do that operation of, cutting it and filtering it out and enhancing it by copying it in another section, which I also do in the vocals at times when you have done all your rides on the vocals and all your compression and everything on vocals, but then you feel that there are certain words which are kind of missing out. So you're cutting it from different places and filtering it out on parallel tracks and adding the highs, only the high frequency content of those.
Have to be done parallelly. I mean, they cannot be done.
They have to be done. They have to be done, and they have to be, understood. So one thing you have to understand is people are there to listen to the song. They are not there to listen to the mix. They don't give a damn about your compression. I don't want to hear compression. I don't want to hear, your reverb. I don't want to hear, the excessive low ends and the things that people try to do to impress. No, you're taking me away from the song. So you have to understand what the song is. And if it is required, do it. But it cannot be you cannot just say, wow, you cannot say, wow, what a reverb, and what a lovely this thing he's done. That's not what people are looking at. These things are disturbing, and I find a lot of people that they squash it and they think that they can pack everything, and the compression or an L2 in the whole thing will solve the problem. It does not.
That is
and L2,
a very idiotic way of doing things. I've seen people. Sorry, Bishwadip, I was just saying, I've been doing a lot of electronic music, and that's a very different genre. But, I see guys producing dubstep where they just slap a limiter on something and they pull the threshold all the way down and just squash everything, kill the dynamics. I mean, that is just a, stupidity. I mean, that just ruins.
See, if it is not deliberately required for the film, if you're not deliberately filtering out something, or deliberately squashing out to give a particular effect, it makes sense. But then, if I'm going to do things like that to a proper song, then I've lost the song. I've lost you as a listener. Then we are listening to all these things.
So when you're working with a composer, how much of your mix and your approach to the recording is dictated by the composition itself? Like
every time, everything.
everything is. So this is something I wanted everybody else to hear. Indrayud has a very interesting question, slightly unrelated to this, but I will come back to that question. I'm just saying that, one of the things that I've seen about your drums and how do you get such powerful drums, and more importantly, such memorable drums? Like, your drums, your rhythm sections, I can hear the Dholbaji, that the rhythm section in that stands out like a hook, or the tablas in Mar Dala along with the ghungroos, they stand out, and it is so much part of it. It's not just the tune that I remember. I also remember that. How do you achieve that kind of emotion from a rhythm section, which is
The rhythm section for me is the most important component in a song, if you call it that way, for a song like that, because everything stands on it. For me, that's the foundation. That's the base. That's the thing that should sound right. It should have that. The grounding should be very strong. So if you're bringing in that, it gives you have to be very careful. It is not loudness. It is, you have to be. One little example that I'll give you is I was doing a live gig for live sound for Shantanu Moitra once, and there was one particular song that was being played. So when the guy on the thing, I don't do too much of live, but I was there for that particular session. So the guy sitting, and he was like really cranking up the bass drum, and when the drummer was going, it was going boom, 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 and like, dude, I mean, we have this is the power. And then I was trying to tell him, hold on a second. This is not, this was at IIT, I think, Mumbai. So I told him, I don't want to hear that. Because what is going to happen is there's a very good bassist who's playing over there. And you're making a perfect, I didn't, of course, tell him that, but I'm telling you this, that he was heading for a straight-on disaster. So what I was trying to tell him is, cut back on the low of the kick. I want to hear the accent of that kick. I don't want to hear the spread of that kick. I want to hear the accent of that particular kick. The body is coming from the bass guitar.
Right.
So then that's how we are going to that's how we'll achieve that combination. So when the kick and the bass, because it was a groove kind of a playing. So when the bass was playing along with the bass drum, then we had a perfect match because we tightened the drums. We tightened the bass drum, and we got a little tightness on the bass guitar as well. But the bass was playing some really good low notes, and a good combination gave me a nice doom doom kind of a thing, and it gave that spread came from the bass guitar. So you have to understand that if you are going to make, you have to bring these little elements out in everything that you do. That's my job, to bring out the timbral quality of each and every instrument, so that I can get the best of both worlds. If I can get that thump of that kick without this thing, I use a little bit of compression in the kick with a quick attack, and a quick release.
Quick release, yeah.
And so I do have that sort of a thing. What I also do is I use the SPL Transient Designer. I've become a little lazy now.
Ask you separately
And
about
that SPL Transient Designer is something which I love using nowadays in most of the things. So I don't need to really compress the entire track, because individually when I'm using those on the kick, the snare, and even some the group percussions of this thing, it gives me a very nice tonal quality.
Sure. I had
a
whole separate question about the relationship between a kick and a bass, because in my production experience, I have seen that there are two ways of looking at it. There are songs, or there are ways where the kick is the provider of the low end, the sub information, and the bass is more of like a low mid character, which is and that especially happens when there's a lot of action in the bass, a lot of busyness in the bass, right? And the other way, are you still here? Can you hear me? Hello? Uh-oh. We're losing.
Yeah, now I can.
Right. Okay, wonderful. So, that is one ratio, and the other ratio is where the bass is providing the entire sub action.
You're frozen.
And the kick is sitting in the low mid Oh, is your net gone or
Could
something?
be my net. I don't know. My Wi-Fi is fine.
Oh, you can exit the live and you can join back again if you like. I'm sorry, everybody. There seems to be a technical, little bit of a technical. Here we are. I think we're back. Are we back, or are we circling again? Oh no. Okay. So, sorry, Bishwadeep has left. Indrayud, if you're still there, your question is going to be next about FOH and why there aren't so many great FOH engineers. Inviting Bishwadeep back. Welcome back, Bishwadeep. Are you here? There's still some circling going on.
Hello.
Hi.
Yeah.
Am I losing you again?
Hello.
Maybe you can turn your Wi-Fi off.
Yeah.
Is that an option? Okay, now it seems to be clearer.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. So can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can.
Okay. So I was wondering about your 2 cents on that. I mean, the relationship between a kick drum and bass. Whether it's a bass guitar or a synth bass, like one is where the bass provides the sub information and the kick rides in the low mid range of the spectrum, and the other is where the kick is actually driving the sub and the low end, and the bass is sitting more on the low mid of the graph. How do you
See,
what would
that
be your
actually depends on the kind of, yeah, that depends on the song. That depends entirely on the song. There are songs which are like really thumpy, like, a full dance kind of a thing that you're having with the kick and stuff like that, where there's a bass pulse which is happening at that point. You have to somewhere find a middle ground, because if you're going to have the bass which is not really going down to say 50 hertz and 60 hertz and things like that, then you are tightening the bass. You see, you have to create space. So if when both of us are singing, we might as well, sing perfectly. Otherwise, if I'm saying something else, or if I'm masking you, or if you're masking me, then it's like two different informations, and we are trying to create a balance between the two. So what happens is, like, in that sort of a song, it also depends on the kind of song. If it's going to be a very groove heavy kind of a, like ding chak kind of a dance kind of a song, then the bass has to automatically just either be a groove or it has to play at a higher register, or if it's got a busy part, then it has to play at a slightly lower mid kind of a range. So
right?
it all depends on the song, because either ways, whether you're enhancing the boost, enhancing or boosting the low end of the kick, or enhancing the low end of the bass guitar, will automatically, you'll have to do the inverse with the other guy in
Right.
order to achieve the ideal combination. So
Right.
it depends entirely on the production, the kind of song, and also I have seen that, if it's a very straight kind of a groove, like a live drum kit kind of a groove, I don't want to boost the kick and draw attention to the drum,
Absolutely.
because that also depends on the kind of song it is. If it's a balladish kind of a song, then the thump and this thing should not disturb the song. But at the same time, it does not mean that it should not be there. And it should definitely, that bed has to be there, the low end has to be there,
Right.
the attack on the snare has to be there, but the snare has to be diffused to a certain extent, so that, it does not slap you every time the song comes in. Then it becomes a little irritating for me. Then then it kind of eats into the vocal frequency, it eats into this thing. It starts distracting you from your thing. Taking you away from the song. So you have to understand the kind of song that you're mixing.
Yeah,
so if it's a balladish kind of a song,
electro kind of EDM kind of song, where your kick is like holy grail, and the kick is what it's all about, and when the drop comes. But when you're doing a ballad, of course, I mean,
So I've come across situations where the song itself is a very balladish kind of a song. You just need to sing, and the music company chief, the head of the music company, walks in and says, "Ye kya hai? Kick chahiye, thoda kick dalo," and like
beat
we're looking at beat chalo. We need this thing, and you're trying to tell him, boss, and he's looking at you, and I'm like, okay. And I'm looking at the composer, and the composer is looking at his production guy. So we do end up in situations like that.
Don't you just
So
turn up
then,
the master in that case?
no, I have done.
Well, yes, you just turn up the master field.
No. You have no idea what I've done. I have held the knob and I've shifted to the left, and throw sharp karo. Then I'm like holding on to the knob and I'm like shifting to the left. So it gives the impression that I'm actually turning it to the, making it sharper. Or I've held the fader and I've gone back like this, giving the impression that I've raised the volume a little. So I had to do these theatrics to keep the producer out of
advice.
sight.
Thank you, Bishwadeep. I'm going to use that. I will practice that move and this. Acha, Indrayud has asked a really important question to us who are performers and live players. There are many amazing audio engineers in the recording and film industry in India, and there are not so many FOH guys that we see for live.
Not so many. Not
FOH,
so many
live,
guys.
live engineers.
Okay,
live.
FOH guys. Okay.
Yeah. Why is that, and what is your 2 cents on that?
Show us the money. and you'll have a line of very good FOH engineers, I'm telling you. And there are some very good FOH engineers who are working on film. And I know some of my good friends who are like Vijay Benegal is a very good FOH engineer. Then, some of these guys are there who are doing live sound, who do very good live sound.
Yeah, some guys are.
With SEL and Shankar Asanloy and stuff like that. So you have to, first of all, acknowledge the existing of a sound guy for stage, number one.
Yeah, the need for that.
So, it's not just, unfortunately, the sound system guy comes up and he does his bit of work. And I know he does this thing. But that's his limitation. It is not his fault. He's there to provide you with the services. But then you need to have somebody to kind of understand this whole process. See, the live performance is very interesting, but we don't have the thing for that. I have only gone to those live performances where I could, have the time to sit, balance. I remember Ab Ke Sawan ke baad, we had a live show of Ab Ke Sawan back in the day, I'm talking about early 2000. So there was an open air thing in SL World in Mumbai. And I was very clear. I spoke to Benny, who was a vendor. This is a different Benny. So I told him that I need this. I need this amp. So I had a separate amp for the bassist. I had a separate amp for the amp speaker, separate Marshalls for the guitarist. I had like each and every guy. I had made sure that I had his own monitor. So then what happened? It was an open air venue, so it helped us a bit in terms of, because it becomes very difficult to play in indoor stadiums and all, when the acoustics, where you're hitting the kick and it suddenly plays in triplet, and you don't know which beat to catch. So that's the acoustics of the thing. But luckily, this was an open air place. So then I placed a monitor virtually in front of every this thing. So in that case, what happened is I made sure that the stage monitoring was very well balanced. Because then this need to hear yourself, and you're constantly trying to, of course, today you have in-ears for this thing, which has solved a lot of problems for a lot of people.
Yeah. I mean, I
but
don't
back in the day,
I go all on in-ears because I do stuff with EDM. There is no way to balance EDM and tabla with actual monitors.
I know. So then what happens is so I tried and I gave everybody an individual thing. Luckily, the rider was respected, but I told them that these are the things that I absolutely need. Because I don't want the bass guitar to just, wonder what's happening and stuff like that. So the drums, the bass, even the percussionist had his thing. And of course, the vocals in the upfront had her thing. And Shubha, being a very good, powerful singer, I had the least of the problems with her because, she really belts it out. And so what happened was, like, everybody had their own system and everybody was monitoring their own this thing. And the result that I got, the comfort level that I found amongst the musicians was superior, was, supreme.
Right.
So that gave me at the FOH level, it gave me a perfect balance, a perfect sound of whatever was happening on stage. So it is very important. It is not, it is again, like I told you, it is the will of the person to provide for such a thing. We do have, in many states, we do have good, sound systems. We do have good speaker systems. They'll flood the whole place with speakers and stuff like that. Fine. But try and make sure that there are some ethics and there are some procedures that you need to have some time to sit and work out on the balance of the, however, even if I am working day in, day out, it's a live performance and it makes a difference. It makes a difference in the playing. It makes a difference. When I balance, when there's a soloist who is sitting over there in the recording, I balance the soloist's headphones. Because you are going to perform the way you are going to hear.
Sure.
So if you're not hearing your click track properly, you're not going to play in tempo. If you're not hearing the harmony properly, you're not going to be singing in tempo or playing your flute and playing in pitch.
Right.
So you have to make sure that, like I was telling you, the basic recording, you have to take these things into account. You have to balance the headphones. If I'm giving you this thing, tabla, I'm going to sit and first listen to it, because I want to know what you're hearing.
Absolutely.
So I can't sit there, open the thing, hey, Mayookhb, can you just say, hey, this is not happening. Can you please play on time? It's not happening. Yeah. Why am I going to complain all that? I have to make sure that the artist is at ease. That is my job.
First time when I recorded with you in Mumbai, you are the first engineer who I saw who spent about 20 minutes in the live room with the headphones. And you are also, I realized that day, you were a great percussionist. You were playing on your legs like that, and you kept playing for 15 minutes while Kitu was, balancing out his tracks and getting his levels and all that. But you were there in the live room. You being the chief engineer that day, you were in the live room with the headphones, and that was probably to just make sure that the artist who will record actually hears what they need to hear, and to have an idea. That fantastic. I mean, this is Indrayud. I hope that answers your question. I had one question from a producer and a composer's point of view to you, and gradually we are coming to the end of this session. It's already been almost 2 hours that we've been doing this. How, as a producer, like when I'm going to give you things in terms of programmed stuff, synth bass, pads, plucked synth, all these kind of things, drums, various kinds of drums, more electronic sounds, the kind of things that I do, and the live stuff, the vocals, the guitars. What can I do to make your life easier so that you don't have to clean up after me and you can get to the creative process of your mix quickly? Because I've seen that engineers have to, they're just wasting a lot of time fixing the fact that I've given like 50 different kick drums in the same place and you're just like chucking one after another. So give us advice, to young producers and young composers who are watching. What can we do to make it easier and more efficient for you?
See, first of all, what I always ask for is a reference track. Even if it's a rough mix, even if it's a very, it gives me your perspective. It tells me that, okay, this is what, it gives me your idea and this is how you want it and this is how.
Intention.
So, intention. And I don't expect you to give me some finished tracks and finish this thing and all that. But when we are sitting and doing a mix, then what happens is like, most of the time what happens is like, most established composers and this thing have an engineer to do these sort of things for them. Now, in case like there are people who cannot afford to have somebody sitting and taking these things, taking this headache onto them, you have to just sit and spend some time in order to club certain things. And I don't have a problem. If you're giving me 5 kick tracks or 6 kick tracks, I don't have a problem with that. So there, maybe you would probably decide that, okay, because you're still not decisive about the fact that which is the one that you're going to use or which is going to sound better. Or maybe you want to leave that as an option. So I'm fine with that. That rough mix is going to give me the nature of the song. Now, it also tells me that, okay, these are the drum tracks and we can use certain elements of these kicks in order to get that. Then I realized that, okay, this particular thing is not really adding, it's not listening, in fact, it's making it muddy, then I can mute those particular tracks. So it gives me a certain level of flexibility of sifting out those particular, I have to sit and actually organize the tracks my way. So even if you've given me a very organized track, there is still further organization that I have to sit and do. If I don't do it, then I'm going to run into a problem with the mix. But always try and make sure that you club, if you have to club, and if there are the things, try and club the same family of instruments together. If there are no overlaps, all the better. So if you're going to have like, even different types of guitars, if you're going to have like broken, don't club it with the vamps. Don't club it with, the rhythm guitar. If you're going to have nylon, don't club it with a steel string. Sure. If you're going to have like mandolins, or if you're going to have a banjo, try and keep them in separate tracks. But if they are coming in various places and if they're not overlapping, then you can keep them on the same track because it's still the same family. For me, it will be easier to cut it and make a groove out of that. If you're going to have percussions, try and group the percussions in such a way that I prefer to have as much of separation as possible.
Yeah. I mean, I would prefer like club a mandolin and a banjo in one track and give it to you like they're two different instruments. Why would I do that?
No, I'm saying if they are overlapping, then of course you have to give in separate places. But then if they're coming in various places and they're not overlapping, then don't unnecessarily do a separate pass for that.
Harder. Ultimately, what are you going to do? You're going to separate it.
No, I'm going to separate it, but then that will also give me some kind of a thing. More often than not, what happens is if it's the same family of instruments, the basics are all there. Then I might need to either automate the EQ on that a little, or maybe bring in the reverb a little more, depending on what kind of a pattern or what kind of a thing. So if it's a rhythmic pattern, maybe I'll just give a roomish kind of a reverb. If it's a lead kind of an instrument, I'll be more generous with the reverb.
Right.
And when you're making a tone for an electric guitar, then you're giving me that particular tone. Though I would, if you're generating a tone, if you're creating like with heavy compression and distortion, if you've created a particular tone, fine, I'm okay with that. Don't give me reverb.
Don't give you reverb. Okay.
Don't give me reverb. You can give me a time delay because that also comes with the thing. If you're giving me a time delay for that, fine. That is part of your playing, and you're probably giving that. That is, you cannot not give me that.
Sure.
Because if that is a phrase, then this is something that I would want you to give to me. Because the time thing you're playing according to the delay that you have given.
Right.
So I don't want to.
Harmonies where we actually play a melody instrument and I play against the delay, so the harmony happens. That's a musical.
Correct. So I don't want to disturb that.
Right.
So if that is the kind of a delay, but what does restrict me is if you're giving me reverb, then later on, if I need to add or subtract reverb out of that, then it becomes a little difficult.
Yeah. So give it dry. You can give a reverb reference, but also give the dry.
See, that reference track is going to give me all the kind of a information that I need to give, and my goal at that point is going to be try and improve as much as possible, but not culturally disturb the mix. I don't want to disturb your aesthetics or the culture. That is what you're looking at. I don't want to mask that.
Right.
There could be times when I could try something and I would leave it. My whole this thing is like like in a recent song that I mixed, and there was a repeat of that first line. It was repeated again in the verse. So what I did was one particular phrase I took from the first phrase and I doubled it with that and I filtered it out and I gave it a slight kind of a delay. So that kind of enhanced the thing. At the same time, that was an aesthetic call. So I asked the composer if that was okay. He was very happy with it. He said, yeah, it's adding to the thing. So I don't want to do something which I don't want to step out of line.
But basically, I very, very strongly believe, even though what you do is, your designation is called an audio engineer or mix engineer, but you are an artist disguised as an engineer. You're not just an engineer. You are a co-composer. You are a co-producer. You're a co-artist. You are very much a part of the final sound that the people will hear and the filter through which my vision will ultimately reach the audience. So you are very much co-producing. If you have an aesthetic idea, if I ever get to actually, I'm dreaming, still praying one day comes that I can.
You're getting melodramatic now.
No. I mean,
all you have to do is call up and say, I need a mix.
I need a mix. But the things that I'm saying, I also have to get to that, Anyway, so let's talk about that.
I'll just briefly say something because before our generation, the technician, the recording engineer was more of an operator. he was like, okay, he facilitated the process of, making a recording possible.
Sure.
But our generation in India was a time when we kind of started getting aesthetically involved. Because, apart from pressing the record button and setting the mics, what are you doing? And why are you doing what you're doing? So in today's generation, these are the things that you, as a recording engineer, these are the things that are expected out of a recording engineer. I would tell you that I can proudly say that we were a generation which enforced that in the mainstream.
Absolutely.
I wanted to be a part of the process. I wanted to be a part of the creative process. I wanted to make a difference. And I wanted to show that person that, he didn't have an idea that, like the tremolos of the mandolins, for example, in Hum Dil Le Jayega Sanam, the tremolos that were there in harmony, I added a delay onto that with a very long feedback. So it gave a kind of a thing, and it spread to the whole thing. Now, when Ismail heard that, he just stood up and he hugged me and he says, "Boss, aapne kya kiya hai?" That was the thing. And it added to the song. I just felt that, it really gave that flourish to that particular moment. So these are things that you can say that, these are your bag of tricks, if you may, and say that, this can enhance that particular process. Absolutely. So today it is far more complex. Today it is far more this thing. The producers are, people who are producing their own songs and music are really good engineers themselves, by the way. So what you are doing, you have also developed a good ear for sound. So we
both kind of come towards each other,
So today there's a very fine line between good engineering and good production. So, and they go hand in hand. So what happens is now, people have started getting smarter. They're getting more complex. They're getting much more intensive. They're getting much more intense, actually, with their work. So it is.
I think there's a
more collaborative, and there's a certain expectation. If I don't know music, what am I doing over there? If I don't have an understanding of music, if I don't understand this thing, because it used to be like back in the day, setting a delay meant that, okay, what is the tempo? Now you divide 60,000 divided by 120 and this is the tempo. So this is how we used to calculate and say, okay, we used to ask him, okay, tera tempo kya hai? Acha, okay. So you did a quick calculation and you set that on the delay. Today, with your plugin, it automatically comes when you add the tempo on your playlist and the delay setting automatically comes. Right. So you can give a quarter note, half note, full note delay, depending on what kind of.
You don't have to concentrate on that particular calculation.
Yeah. So